Hello everyone, my name is Erin Dougherty. I am a senior sculpture BFA, and this summer I had the chance to be part of the Summer Undergraduate Research Experience and work on a project titled Sculpting Resilience, Conserving the Pollinators Through the Arts. I worked with Professor Emily Putoff and several community collaborators to co-create a pollinator garden in Kingston, New York. Our focus of this project was pollinators, specifically solitary bees. Now, think of what you ate for breakfast, and ask yourself if what you had was made possible through bee or insect pollination. Unless you had just plain rice cakes or corn cereal with no milk or sugar or fruit, chances are everything you had was pollinated by a pollinator. Pollinator and bee species are in decline. This is due to a lack of habitat, lack of forage material, and the use of chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides, among many other reasons. My faculty mentor, Emily Putoff, is a co-founder of the Hudson Valley Bee Habitat, which is an organization using the arts to preserve the pollinators. Last year, they were awarded a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Environmental Justice Zone grant to educate and work with the Kingston community to install a garden to preserve the pollinators. Our community collaborators were Corrine and Nadej of Con Landscaping, and a group of Kingston teens and college students from the YMCA Farm Crew, as well as Professor Putoff's fellow Hudson Valley Bee Habitat co-founder, Elena Snezik. The site for the garden is on land owned and managed by the Kingston Land Trust, who's a fiscal sponsor of the larger project. The site is adjacent to the Kingston Green Line, which is an urban walking and bike trail developed along the rail lines that once crossed through Kingston, and it is in a neighborhood across the street from the JFK Elementary. These are some photos of the site before we did any work, and this is another image showing a different perspective of the site with an early garden attempt. To begin the garden process, we first engaged with the teens in pollinator education workshops to get them interested and invested in the pollinators. They then had a chance to explore the site and envision what they think should be there based off what they learned. They were encouraged to be imaginative and think of how this garden could activate all of their senses. We came together as a group and looked at everyone's drawings and heard about their different visions, and from this we wrote down reoccurring ideas and co-designed a single sketch of the site with these ideas incorporated. We met again on site and revisited the ideas, coming up with a 2-scale drawing of the site with a more specific layout. In this collaboration process, we thought about who we were making the garden for and what we wanted them to experience. In one aspect, we were making the garden for the pollinators, but it was also something for the community to enjoy. This led us to the development of 4 design themes that guided the rest of our design process, and they are diversity, fun, education, and curiosity. Moving forward, we made sure to think of how the garden would embody these themes. Once we had a refined design on paper, we started to map the different sections physically on site, using powdered garden lime to draw on the ground what we had on paper. This was a back and forth process between looking at what we drew on paper and looking at what it looked like in real life. We were constantly revisiting, reevaluating, and redesigning the garden sections to find what worked the best. In this photo, you can see the simultaneous actions of drawing and designing on paper and drawing with dirt and mulch physically on the site. Once we had a finalized garden plan, we hosted a community presentation for the Kingston Land Trust, a neighbor whose child attended the elementary school, and Susan Heareth, who runs the YMCA Farm Crew and teaches at Suny New Paltz. They gave us new inputs and insights which we were able to incorporate into the garden. Following the presentation, we got to work sculpting the site. We started with 30 cubic yards of dirt to build the flower beds and build up mounds between the garden edge and the road. Another photo of us working, really chipping into that dirt pile. The result of our sculpting and design process was the following garden sections. 3 main entrances, 1 coming up from the green line and 2 from the road. A main winding path with several offshoots to encourage curiosity and closer exploration between the visitors and the pollinators. 4 main plant beds, 1 in the back, 1 to the left, and 2 by the road. The solitary bee habitat structure, which will go where the little orange hexagon is on the photo. A bare ground area, which serves an educational purpose as well as a functional one. Since around 70% of solitary bees are ground dwelling, we wanted to leave an area of the site untouched so they could burrow and nest underground, and also to teach people about ground dwelling solitary bees. A bee beach, which is an area where rainwater will be able to collect so the pollinators will have access to water they need in the pollination process. Benches and a seating area, so visitors will be able to enjoy the garden out of the sun and be with the bees. And a game area. The game area was the teens' idea to combine fun and education, especially for the younger students from the elementary school. I was given the title Director of Game Design, and it was my job to develop a tic-tac-toe game, a book box to go with the seating area, and a vision center with magnifying glasses, which I'll get to later. The tic-tac-toe game comes from one that used to be a part of the old wooden playground at Forsyth Nature Park in Kingston, and I wanted it to be nostalgic of old Kingston playgrounds. I designed the X's to be spread butterfly wings and the O's to be flowers. We wanted to maximize the amount of games on the structure, so we incorporated a scavenger hunt and tile mosaic by using the two blank faces of the wooden cubes. Emily and I took a trip to Lowe's and sourced materials, and I then drew a 2-scale plan based on the materials we found. I did a more refined drawing of the game and a miniature model to show the teens. I did a sketch for the book box, which I made a beetle book box, based off the common green June bug which we would see occasionally while working on site. And since we had a beetle for the book box, I made the vision center a ladybug. The vision center is composed of swiveling binoculars in the head and magnifying glasses and UV light filtering glasses as spots. The idea for a vision center came from one of our teens after an impromptu clover workshop. It was a nice day and the clover had all bloomed in the field, and we took magnifying glasses to examine them. This really resonated and inspired with one of the teens, and she came up with the vision center as an idea so that others could explore the garden in the same way she explored the clover. I presented my sketches to the students and got their input on them, so in the second phase of this project I could construct them. The main component of this garden is the solitary bee habitat sculpture. This is significant because it serves as a nursery for baby bees. It is composed of wood hexagons, and the hexagon serves a structural purpose and a metaphorical purpose. It speaks to bees in general, but it is also a very stable shape, alluding to how coming together forms a strong community. To find our pollinator plants for the garden, we took a visit to a permaculture homestead in Woodstock run by a man named Jared. He had plants available for us to use in the garden, and we talked about soil ecology. It was my job to then research all the possible garden plants at Jared's and at local nurseries and compile the information into a spreadsheet. In the spreadsheet, I had to get each species' Latin name, common name, mature size, bloom time, so we didn't get all plants that bloom during the same time of the year, whether it preferred sun or shade, so we can maximize growth, its relationship to the environment, specifically it was a deer, rabbit, or groundhog resistant, what pollinators were drawn to its nectar, and whether or not it was a host plant for moths or butterflies, and the price per plant for budget reasons. We printed circle images of pollinator plants of different sizes and had the teens place them on a blank map of the site to determine where they should be planted. We taught them about the different plants and how to group plants in a way that would be helpful for the bees. Once we had all our plants mapped, Emily picked up all the plants and we spent the weekend planting the garden with the help of community volunteers. While most of what we planted was deer resistant, we knew the deer would eat them if they got hungry. We installed 2 layers of posts wrapped with twine as a method of deer fencing. We used these posts to further beautify the garden by hanging flags from them. It added visibility and allowed for the installation of signage. The teens translated their pollinator knowledge onto brightly colored wooden signs, laser cut into silhouettes that matched the garden. We had a bee sign, butterfly, Luna moth, ladybug, bat, hummingbird, and flower. And these are all of our signs together. Once we had the signs finished and installed, the first phase of the garden was complete, so we hosted a community opening. The teens explained each part of the garden while visitors explored the plants and observed pollinators. This was our table for the opening, with a refined and clear map of the site with all the plants we planted, and a finished bee habitat to represent the sculpture which will be installed there. The completion of the garden brings us to the second phase of the project, planning sculpture grill design workshops. While we were sculpting the garden, I was conducting material research to find the most effective design methods for the steel grills which go on the habitat structure. This fall, there will be a series of workshops given to another group of Kingston teens employed at the Department of Regional Art Workers Kingston, and it was my job to plan these workshops. The first material research I conducted was in the art of kirigami, which is Japanese for cut paper. In this method, you fold a square of paper 3 times and cut into it, as if you were making a paper snowflake. Here are my tests, one of a bee with flowers and one of a butterfly. You then open the folds of the paper to reveal the full pattern. The issue with this design method is it limits creativity and the diversity of designs. While the students can make different pollinator patterns, all the grills would end up looking similar to each other. One thing we had done this summer was make cyanotype t-shirts for our collaborators. This process involved putting a light-sensitive surface treatment on fabric or paper, placing a stencil over it, and exposing it to light. This transfers the image to the surface. What we liked about this process is how it was linked to the sun and pollinators. Bees and butterflies pollinate during the day in the sun, but moths and bats pollinate at night. This opened up a sun and shadow dynamic and led us to shadow puppets as a mean of collaborative design. Building off the cut paper research I developed in the kirigami tests, I made a few pollinator shadow puppets. This is the method we will use for the grill design workshops. Each student can create puppets in their own style, and we can build compositions by playing with them in the light. I will continue to develop these workshops in the fall in an independent study with Professor Putoff, and help teach the next group of Kingston teens in late October for the second phase of the project. This experience has shown me how the arts can be a powerful tool in engaging with the community and empowering them creatively. I learned tangible design and sculpting skills, but I also learned ways to spread knowledge about pollinators and get people invested and excited in conserving them. Art encourages caring through beauty. It makes the process more enjoyable, and it gives people a greater sense of pride in being an artist. To conclude, I would like to thank the RSCA and Suny New Paltz for this opportunity and helping make this pollinator garden happen. I would also like to thank my faculty mentor, Emily Putoff, and our collaborators, Elena Snezik from the Hudson Valley Bee Habitat, Karina Nadej from Con Landscaping, the YMCA Farm Crew, all of our community volunteers, and of course, the pollinators. I would like to encourage everyone watching to visit our garden this fall or next spring at Grove Street, Kingston. Thank you!